In the ancient shadows of Middle-earth, a single choice could have changed the fate of nations. The destinies of elves, dwarves, and men alike hinged upon the creation of the Rings of Power, artifacts that held the essence of preservation, mastery, and a hint of malice. Through these rings, Tolkien unraveled the allure and danger of power, showing us how the pursuit of dominion could bring both greatness and ruin. But what if this chapter of history had never been written? What if the Rings of Power had never been forged? Join us now as we journey into an alternate Middle-earth, a land untouched by these fateful creations, to explore how light and shadow would fall in new ways across this ancient world. In the Second Age, a knowledge as ancient as Arda itself was brought to the Elves by an unexpected visitor. Sauron arrived in Eregion in a fair guise, calling himself Annatar, the Lord of Gifts. With words cloaked in charm and wisdom, he offered the Elves a gift they had never known, the craft of ring-making. Once a Maya of Aule, the valor of craftsmanship and mastery over the earth, Sauron possessed a depth of knowledge and enchantment that few could rival. Through Annatar, the Elves were introduced to the art of ring-making, a subtle craft that required weaving intentions into metal, creating objects that could hold lasting effects. While the Elves of Eregion were skilled artisans, it was Sauron's guidance that unveiled the possibilities of using rings to prevent decay, to keep beauty unstained, and to hold back the slow march of time. Under his teaching, they learned to infuse rings with powers far beyond the beauty and function of traditional elven craft. And so, with the guidance of Annatar, the elven smiths took up the art of ring lore, unknowingly stepping into a path where creation and control were bound together, their artistry laced with Sauron's dark purpose. In the guise of a lord of the elves, Annatar, he came to Eregion and there instructed the elves in the arts of ring-making, for he was a lord of subtlety. But secretly he corrupted their craft and devised a snare, for into the 3 rings that the elves made he did not insert his will, but into the 7 for the dwarf lords and the 9 for mortal men he breathed the shadow of his purpose, and into the 1 ring that he made himself he poured the greatest part of his power, so that by means of it he could control all the others. But in this world, the elves sensed his deceit early, rejecting his teachings. Yet the elves were not deceived forever, for some of the Eldar were suspicious of him, and they would not learn the craft of ring-making from him. Suppose that this suspicion grew, and led Celebrimbor to reject Annatar's teachings. Without Sauron's guidance, the elves would lack the knowledge needed to create such powerful artifacts, and the concept of the Rings of Power would remain unrealized. Outright rejection by the elves, this was not something Sauron, once the fair Annatar, could bear. His designs crumbled before him, cast aside by those he had hoped to deceive. Without the rings to serve as tools of influence, he was forced to abandon all subtlety and wage open war. The elves' defiance became a spark in the darkness, igniting the fires of his fury and urgency to dominate by force. Sauron would not delay. He marshaled his armies, amassing dark creatures and warlike hordes, marching them swiftly against Eregion. His assault on Eregion was swift and relentless. Tolkien wrote of this time, but Sauron came against them with open war, and he broke the land and laid it waste. With each passing day, the forces of Mordor pressed further into the elven realms, overwhelming the defenders and leaving ruin in their wake. As Sauron's armies continued their relentless march, leaving ruin in their wake, news of his conquest reached Númenor. For centuries, Númenor had shared a deep bond with the Elves of Middle-earth, particularly with the Elves of Lindon, led by the High King Gil-galad. Tar Minister, who now ruled Númenor, understood the threat Sauron posed to both Middle-earth and his own people, and his sympathy for the Elves, rooted in this ancient friendship, compelled him to act. Tar Minister ordered a vast fleet to set sail, bringing Númenor's unmatched military strength to Middle-earth's shores. So great was the power and splendor of the Númenorians in the noontide of their realm that the servants of Sauron would not withstand them. As these Númenorian warriors stood beside the Elves, and together they drove back Sauron's forces with relentless determination, reclaiming Eriador and forcing the Dark Lord to retreat eastward. Beaten, but unbroken, Sauron returned to Mordor, where he brooded upon his defeat and prepared for the next phase of his campaign. He set his eye upon men, especially those beyond Númenor's reach, with whom he hoped to sway through gifts and promises. In the centuries that followed, Sauron worked quietly, building alliances and tempting mortal rulers with visions of grandeur, and because of his cunning, he gained many friends among the race of men. Tolkien recounts, for Sauron knew well that the hearts of men could be bent with the promise of power. Even without the One Ring to bolster his strength, Sauron's influence began to seep like poison into the realms of men. As his power grew among the kingdoms of men, Sauron boldly claimed the title of King of Men, a declaration that did not go unnoticed by Númenor. This affront to Númenor's pride provoked Ar-Pharazôn, the last and mightiest of Númenor's kings, who sought to challenge Sauron's claim. In 3261, Ar-Pharazôn sailed to Middle-earth with a host so vast that Sauron's armies crumbled before it. Seeing Númenor's unstoppable strength, Sauron chose a different path. He surrendered willingly, seeking to corrupt Númenor from within. Once in Númenor, Sauron's power of persuasion proved deadly. Rising quickly in influence, he played upon the Númenorian fear of mortality and seduced Ar-Pharazôn with visions of glory and eternal life. He turned the hearts of Númenorians to the worship of Melkor, darkening their once bright spirit. The chief of the gods is he that dwells in the void, who will conquer in the end, and in the void make endless realms for his servants. In time, Ar-Pharazôn was convinced to take the ultimate step, to invade Aman itself and claim immortality by force. But this was an act of unimaginable hubris, and the Valar responded by calling upon Eru Ilúvatar. The world was reshaped, Númenor was swallowed by the sea, lost forever beneath the waves. Though Sauron's spirit survived, his physical form was destroyed in the cataclysm. He returned to Middle-earth as a shadow, diminished and unable to assume a fair form again. The rings were Sauron's most insidious weapon, a way to dominate not by strength but by seduction. As Gandalf described, there is only one Lord of the Ring, and he does not share power. In this alternate world, the 9 rings never fall into the hands of men, and thus the dreaded Nazgûl, the Ringwraiths, never come to be. Instead, the Witch King, who was destined to become Sauron's chief servant, would remain a mortal lord, bound by the same fate as other men, passing into legend, but not into shadow. The 3 elven rings, Narya, Nenya, and Vilya, were created not for domination, but for healing and preservation. As Tolkien described, those who made them did not desire strength or domination or hoarded wealth, but understanding, making, and healing to preserve all things unstained. For the Dwarves, The absence of the seven rings would mean freedom from consuming greed. Tolkien wrote that they gathered hordes of wealth, but they fell also under the shadow, for their hearts were turned to greed and anger. Without these rings, the dwarven kingdoms would flourish without the curse of avarice. Their strength would be found not in the endless pursuit of wealth, but in their loyalty, craftsmanship, and alliances. Without the Ring of Power, there would be no One Ring, the ultimate weapon in Sauron's plan to control Middle-earth. Without the One Ring to anchor his essence and power, Sauron's ambitions would unravel entirely. The cataclysm that swallowed Númenor would not only destroy his physical form, but diminish his spirit in ways he could not recover from. His spirit would survive, but as a diminished shadow, unable to regain the same power or corporeal form he once wielded. Sauron would linger only as a faint memory of malice, unable to wield influence over Middle-earth in the way he had planned. In this world, Middle-earth would emerge from the Second Age without the enduring shadow of Sauron's return. The kingdoms of elves, men, and dwarves would enter the Third Age unburdened by the weight of his legacy. Rivendell and LOTR would remain sanctuaries of elven wisdom and beauty, yet they would not bear the pressure of defending against a dark resurgence. The dwarves, free from the corruptive influence of the rings, would remain steadfast, building their halls and forging alliances through craftsmanship and trade, rather than the poisoned allure of greed. The kings of men who might have fallen would instead pass into legend, their lineages intact, untainted by the creeping shadow of wraithdom. And so, we leave you with a question. How would this world evolve without the One Ring's insidious presence? Would the free peoples thrive in an age of peace, or would new powers rise to take advantage of the void left by Sauron's absence? Share your thoughts and ideas in the comments below, and let's imagine this alternate history together. Until our paths cross again, may the stars shine upon your faces.